Some years ago, I wrote a screenplay for what I hoped would be a movie of the week on the man considered to be the most lascivious, the most sexually obsessed president we've ever had. No, not that one. Warren Harding. Harding reputedly had women stashed in every closet in the White House. He actually conceived a child out of wedlock while President of the United States. He, in a sense, makes Bill Clinton look like a monk in terms of matters of promiscuity. And he also had the reputation of competing for the worst President of the United States award. I've read historians debate whether it was Harding, Coolidge, or Grant. Be as it may, that somebody so hugely unsuited for a position of power would find himself holding the greatest power any person can hold in this world, which is to be President of the United States. How could someone so manifestly unsuitable, and Harding was one of the first to tell you that he got the presidency by a fluke, and will be the first to tell you that he was overmatched by his being promoted, the Peter Principle, being promoted to his position of incompetence. So he was aware of his limitations. He was a humble man. He was a good man, and has his reputation because he didn't have the judgment to pick good people around him. Many, in fact, were corrupt, inadequate at best, and corrupt at worst. So his reputation, though very high at the time of his sudden death, probably of a heart attack in the Palace Hotel in San Francisco, 3 years into his administration, he was much beloved, a handsome man, had a wonderful speaking voice, which was important. This was just before microphones really became available. So he looked like a president. In fact, that's how he was described, that he belonged on a Roman coin in one of the senators. He had that wonderful Leonine profile. But other than looking like a president, I think that would be the extent of his qualifications for the job. And as I say, unfortunately, many of his appointees took advantage of him, so that within weeks of his death, one of the worst federal scandals erupted, the Teapot Dome scandal, having to do with the inappropriate selling of naval oil leases to oil companies. His Secretary of Interior actually went to prison. Interestingly, he went to prison for having accepted a bribe that the giver of the bribe, the CEO of an oil company, was acquitted of having given him. Again, the power of money. But all of this soiled Harding's reputation, so that we rather abruptly go from a man who was revered at his death, and the train took him from the San Francisco hotel where he died back to his hometown in Marion for his funeral. The tracks were lined with weeping mourners who venerated the loss of this great man. In fact, the train trip was so well attended as it went from town to town, it exceeded even that which happened after Lincoln was assassinated. So this was a man who was truly revered. He was the first president to be elected by women. They just had gotten the vote in 1920, and they put him into the Oval Office, probably because of his wonderful paternal good looks. And as I say, within weeks of his death, the public began to sour on him as more and more evidence came out as to how corrupt his administration was. He himself never got a penny from it. It was the people around him, which is the same thing which brought Ulysses S. Grant's administration down. Grant, like Harding, was an honest man, but the people around him were not. So these wonderful discrepancies, being revered when in point of fact, had the public known what a roue he was, he probably would have been impeached. And again, his reputation was soiled as more and more evidence of his sexual peccadillos came out. The woman with whom he conceived a child wrote a bestseller, which the Republican Party tried to suppress but couldn't. The President's Daughter was the name of that book. So this wonderfully corrupt administration during the Jazz Age, all around this well-meaning but hugely inadequate man, now the President of the United States, it seemed to me formed the basis for a wonderful movie of the week. Hollywood being what it was, I couldn't sell it, so I turned it into a novel, which did pretty well, got wonderful reviews, called Fluke, because it was a fluke that he became a president of the United States. The Republican convention was deadlocked. It went through, 15, 20, 30 votes before they finally settled on this dark horse, because the obvious candidates, the powerful, competent candidates for the presidency, canceled each other out. You had the same kind of deadlock we see now between Democrats and Republicans, but Republicans couldn't agree on the front runners. There were several front runners, and none of them could quite get over the top. And so after dozens of votes, the convention, exhausted, chose Harding simply because nobody hated him. The front runners always had their detractors, but nobody had anything bad to say about Senator Harding, because nobody knew him, because he didn't do anything. So his innocuousness, his inability to act as a lightning rod for the enmity that often dooms political careers if you are competent, didn't apply in his case. So he sort of slipped in simply because no one had anything bad to say about him. I talk about damning with faint praise. So he's president of the United States, and quickly becomes overwhelmed by the responsibilities, which I think contributed to his heart attack. He was 56, 57 when he collapsed at the Palace Hotel. And as part of my research for this screenplay novel, I went to his hometown of Marion, Ohio. And I first went to the Harding Memorial. This was sort of like a mini Jefferson Memorial, about 12 marble pillars and a dome over the top, where he and his wife then were buried in a crypt below the marble floor. And money poured in to build this memorial for this beloved president, and then as more and more scandal came out, the funds dried up and they never finished the darn thing. Till finally in 1980, I think the Marion, Ohio City Council felt a little guilty about the shabby way they treated this man and his memorial, and they finished it. But not with high quality materials, I should add, and by the time I got there, it was already starting to crumble again. And then I went to his home in Marion, Ohio, and he lived there all of his life except for the 3 years he was in the White House. It was a very modest home, Queen Anne wood, sort of the Warren Buffett, Harry Truman kind of house. And as you know, virtually every president's home is available for visits. There are tours. It could be Millard Fillmore's home or Calvin Coolidge's home. They are all National Trust properties. And of course, so was Harding's home. And I knock on the door, and the docent, very lonely lady, because very few people come to honor Harding or come to his home, he was delighted to have company. And so little to do, she really spent maybe an hour or 2 hours with me and showed me every nook and cranny of Harding's house. And we went to the bedroom, and she opened up his closet door, and there's all his clothes. The clothes of the President of the United States, 1920 to 1923. And I remember he had a white dinner jacket with a little gravy stain on the lapel, And I could almost sense that Harding would be walking in any moment and going into his closet and taking out his outfit for that evening. So I had a sense of intimacy with this man that I doubt it would be possible if you go to other homes of other presidents. You probably have to stay behind the velvet ropes, but not in the Harding household. And finally we go outside into the backyard. There's a little garden. And the centerpiece of the garden is a white obelisk on which is engraved a quotation from one of Harding's speeches, and he made many, many speeches. They tended to be quite fulsome, with a lot of flowery Edwardian phrases, but not this quotation. He said it, I think, when he was a senator back in 1919, and was running for office, and here is the quotation: "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." Warren G. Harding, 1919.